Hi, I'm Sharaad Kuttan and welcome to Let's Talk, the show that brings you the most important conversations in art, culture and ideas. And today I'm going to be speaking to the director of the Georgetown Literary Festival and one of her collaborators who've set up an anthology, or rather published an anthology of writings that reflect some of the work that was done at the Georgetown Lit Festival over the last couple of years, and that's Muara. So I'm going to introduce Pauline Fan and Hafiz Hamzah. Thank you so much for being on the show. Pauline, let's begin with the Georgetown Lit Fest just passed. Lots of challenges over the year because of the pandemic. What was the strategy going into this particular iteration of the festival?
So the last 2 years of the festival, as you know, have been extremely challenging. And of course, doing everything, being forced to put everything online was something we had not anticipated before. And so a lot of it was a learning process for us from the beginning. I would say this year, we were hoping from the beginning of this year that actually we would be able to do something physical, but by mid-year, it seems that we actually had to do everything online again. And so one of the challenges was that we just didn't have a lot of time to put everything together. The second challenge was just, of course, the technicalities of putting an online event together and still making it feel like a festival. I think that's one of the main challenges. And also not ending up just like another webinar. You know, I think everyone since last year already had webinar fatigue, and that's one of the things we really wanted to make sure was not to end up fatiguing everybody out.
Yeah, I guess there's been a lot of discussion around hybridity with events now, or what used to be a kind of pure play live events and now had to deal with what the future might hold, right? And hybridity has become like the kind of concept around which they hang all these new strategies. Hafiz, I want to ask you, because you've been on my show before, we talked about the journal Svara and your work there. Why did Svara decide this time to collaborate with GTLF on producing this anthology? It looks beautiful, you know, there it is. It looks very handsome and so much in it, right? So tell us, why did you decide to collaborate this time?
I think untuk Svara kita selalu percaya kena maksudnya kena ada penerbitan yang elok, yang kemas, yang bagus untuk jadi satu macam bentuk dokumentasi. Dan itu yang pada pandangan saya secara peribadi, GTLF dah 10 tahun sebelum ni tak ada satu yang hard copy fizikal yang kita boleh pegang bila-bila selain weekend yang acara itu berlangsung. So untuk saya itu sangat penting lah, dan kebetulan untuk Svara kita memang minat dengan penerbitan. Kita rasa kita boleh berlaku adil terhadap penerbitan Muara dan juga GTLF. Jadi saya rasa tak fikir panjang pula bila dia tanya, dan saya kalau tak silap idea awalnya pun memang kita bincangkan pada 2019. Memang dari kami yang usulkan, kita cakap kosong tapi akhirnya menjadi kenyataan dan GTLF setuju dan jadilah Muara.
Yeah, it's actually great because I guess as Hafiz said, I mean, one of the things about the live events is that a lot of it is ephemeral. It passes, and you know, and it's not captured. I mean, there is documentation, but I think GTLF hasn't, over the decade or so that it's been in existence, really documented.
Not a lot. In fact, that's something that you and I started in 2019 when we decided to actually podcast the sessions, even the live sessions. And actually, that decision, I think, made it a little bit easier to move into this online phase because we already had a partner, Nusantara Audiobooks, who was doing the podcasting. So when this pandemic arrived and we had to actually think about going online, I think that was a natural decision for us to actually focus on podcasting rather than just live webinars.
Right. I mean, one of the things, of course, is an archive, right? An archive of the kind of intellectual activity that kind of is located here. I wanted to ask you about Muara because I did watch a little, I think, presentation by Badrul Hisham about Muara when he says that it's something like the connections between Georgetown and the world and back and forth, something about the festival, but not only about the festival. So Hafiz, tell us a little bit about the choices. I mean, as one of the editors, right? 4 editors in that, yourself, Hafiz. What's in it and why did you choose those?
So kalau kita tengok Georgetown Literary Festival, every year, setiap tahun memang akan menghimpunkan ramai penulis dari luar, dari seluruh dunia, Nusantara apa semua ni berkumpul di Georgetown untuk satu weekend dan berbincang dan bergaul lah. Jadi untuk muara ni saya fikir dari awal pun memang jelas dia punya arah tuju. Kita nak replicate, kita tahu kita nak cerminkan semangat yang sama tu, maksudnya this so-called international punya gathering dari festival ke dalam bentuk buku juga. So that is why saya rasa kita tak ada bincang yang banyak pun tentang itu. Itu memang semua dah bersetuju dari awal dan kita cuba himpun dan kumpulkan dan curate dengan cara yang kita rasa dapat mewakili semangat dan juga spirit itulah yang kerencaman, kepelbagaian itu yang kita bawa juga dalam buku ni.
So, Pauline, explain, because you're a translator, so you have the best, what is the word, Malay, English equivalent of Muara? Because I'm thinking, first of all, that Georgetown is not, in fact, at the confluence of, not the confluence, at the mouth of a river, right?
No, not exactly, but it's figurative.
So it's
It's all metaphorical.
Okay. So that's great. So Muara is clearly a metaphor for the way Georgetown operates, kind of.
Georgetown and the literary festival itself, I think the literary festival itself is this kind of meeting place, and it is the place of that opens up to many possibilities and opens up to the larger world. At the same time inviting people in and inviting the outside world in. So it's a metaphor for the festival, it's a metaphor for Georgetown as well, for Malaysia as well. But really, I think, like Hafiz said, I think all the editors, so the editors, Hafiz and Izzuddin Ramli, who is the curator for the Malay sessions for GTLF, they worked on the Malay pieces in Muara, and Badrul, Hisham and I worked on the English pieces. So it was actually quite a nice balance, and we made sure that it was pretty bilingual, except that also it's quite multilingual as well, because we do have translations, so we also feature some other languages, like we have some pieces from Vietnamese, Macedonian, we have German, and we also have Persian, Dari Persian, Afghan Persian.
Right. What fascinates me, I guess you couldn't have called it Pelabuhan, which would have been more literal, which is the port, is it?
But that's one of the images we had in our mind, you know, definitely, that was one of the harbour.
The harbour,
yes,
right,
that
okay.
that kind of idea.
Right. I know it's a mix of things. Who is your audience for this? Is it some person who went to the festival, who wants something now, who listened to those wonderful lectures that were in 2018, Elliot, and so on? 2019. Is it for them, or is it for people who didn't actually have the experience of Georgetown?
Saya membayangkan Muara ni jadi macam spill over, maksudnya apa yang berlaku hujung minggu tu tak semua orang boleh datang, katakan. Tapi essence ataupun intipati daripada acara tu Saban Tahun, ini cara kita untuk keluarkan dan untuk disebarkan lebih jauh, lebih meluas. Terutama kepada orang yang tak sempat pun dalam 10 tahun, 11 tahun ni mungkin tak pernah sempat sekali pun ke Georgetown Literary Festival. So ini saya rasa mungkin satu bentuk introduction, pengenalan yang baik juga untuk yang belum pernah. Tapi kalau yang dah pernah, saya rasa dia mungkin akan sangat selesa dan faham bila dia tengok the whole concept ataupun cara kita persembahkan buku ni lah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that the both of you are involved in, you as director of the festival, Hafiz is somebody who works on a regular journal, right, is that it's predicated on the idea that there are readers out there, right? And I think the festival has done so much to make reading sexy again, or to give it a sense of heft or importance. Where do you think that's going? Do you feel, Pauline, that we're really making headway, you know, in terms of encouraging people to read, and read in particular ways, not just read on their devices, but read deeply?
Well, I think so. I think the Georgetown Literary Festival definitely has its place in that. But I think there are other initiatives as well, like Svara, and like actually I see it a lot in the Malay language circles. I'm sure there's some of that also in the English language circles, and definitely in the Mahua circles as well. But I do see it a lot in the younger generation of Malay language writers and readers, that there is a hunger for actually reading, and not just reading, but discussion and deeper reading. I think people are getting more and more critical. The kind of discussions that are happening are actually really interesting in the Malay circles, because there is not just, it's no more just a black and white establishment and indie. There's a lot of things in between, and there's a lot of conversations that are happening both on the page, in the written word, as well as in conversation, which I think is a really healthy and wonderful thing. So I would like to see more of that in some of the other circles as well. Of course, I'm not conversant in Mandarin, for example, but I know that the Mahua community is also extremely active. In fact, we have featured them quite a lot at the GTLF as well. The Tamil community is also a very interesting one, and that's something that we featured this year in one of our podcasts, a Malay language podcast with the writer M. Navin, moderated by Nur Adila. And just to give a glimpse of the Tamil writing in Malaysia, and M. Navin is a really interesting writer. Actually, one of his books has been banned by the Home Ministry.
Well, that's always a mark of being interesting.
Indeed. But a few of his cerpen have been translated into Malay, and so that gives an access to a larger audience as well. So that's a fascinating look.
Hafiz, do you agree with Pauline's assessment that a lot of interesting things happening, that there are in fact those conversations, and they're driven by a commitment to write? Because I know Malaysians can't stop talking. We don't have a problem talking. But I'm part of the problem. You're having a talk show, right? But reading requires a very different part of your brain, I think, doesn't it? A different commitment to that intellectual work. Do you think it's happening?
Saya rasa ya. Paling tidak kalau real case scenario, mungkin Svara jadi satu bentuk contoh yang kita boleh rujuk sekarang ni. Daripada tak ada apa, kita pun orang mengatakan tak yakin dengan penerbitan, apatah lagi bercetak. Tapi kita buat juga, mungkin tak meluas as in masa, tapi growing. Dan menarik juga untuk saya, macam saya setuju dengan Pauline tadi, dalam section ataupun community yang bahasa Melayu ni, yang menulis, yang menerbitkan, saya rasa sangat rancak, sangat rancam, dan terutamanya banyak juga yang muda-muda. Betul kita boleh persoalkan kualiti apa semua tu, tapi tu ada satu kelompok yang percaya pada penerbitan, pembacaan buku semua ni, itu satu benda yang saya rasa sangat baik. Dan kalau satu lagi saya boleh jadi contoh juga untuk bezakan antara section yang BM dan English ni, equivalent kepada Svara untuk English sekarang di Malaysia, kalau ada yang saya tak tahu, boleh tolong maklumkan. Tapi setakat ini yang saya tahu, kita ada satu penerbitan yang mewakili itulah.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned to Let's Talk. Hi, and welcome back to Let's Talk. I'm Sharaad Kuttan. With me, Pauline Fan, director of the Georgetown Literary Festival, and also Hafiz Hamzah, one of the editors of Svara, the journal, and in collaboration they put together an anthology of writings and poetry titled Muara. So let's come back to the festival for a while. I want to ask you about podcasts. What's out there for people, because there's now been an accumulation of podcasts and people can go, I know there are different platforms. How best to access this, and what can they expect to encounter? I
think the easiest way to access our podcast would be to go to our Spotify page, which is Georgetown Literary Festival. It's an open Spotify page which you can access this year's podcast, last year's podcast, and also the previous year's podcast. So we actually now have 3 years of sessions in podcasts. This year we did around 30 podcasts, both in English and Malay. And so Izzuddin Ramli, who's the curator for the BM sessions, did about 12. He curated about 12 conversations, and I did the rest in English. I think we have a wonderful, so the theme this year was microcosmos. And the idea behind that theme was that actually in some ways we all felt that our universes were kind of shrinking. Right, okay. All in isolation and all of that, but at the same time it was still a cosmos, and at the same time, while withdrawing perhaps from the physical world, there's still a way to make a kind of, not virtual, but a literary world of the imagination and of that kind of, those connections that still exist and are still possible through reading and through listening and through imagining and writing. So that's the idea behind that, and we had a wonderful lineup this year, actually. I would really have loved to do a physical festival because so many great and wonderful writers and conversations. Some of the highlights for me were, so we decided very early on to do a conversation about Dante because it happens to be Dante's 700th death anniversary this year.
It's Dante of the Inferno.
Yes, Dante of the Divine Comedy, yes, okay. Exactly. The poet of of hell
The port of hell. Okay.
and the beyond. But so we approached the Italian embassy, and actually, so they collaborated with us, supported this this conversation. We got a scholar, a literary scholar from Italy, Professor Giuliana Nuvoli, who's wonderful, like a Dante expert. So she's been giving Dante talks the entire year for his anniversary. And then we invited Mastura Alatas, who of course is Malaysian, but has been living in Italy and teaching there for the last 30 years or more, you know. So, and also very well versed in Italian literature, as well as Malaysian literature and world literature. So it was a wonderful conversation.
Well, I want to ask you a bit about the title. It's Mikrocosmos as opposed to micros. There's always a K. Is there a reason? Is that because it's in Malay?
Partly because I wanted to blur the boundaries between languages, and it's possible to do that with such a word as microcosmos. And also because it's a tribute also to Bela Bartok. You know, Bela Bartok, the composer. He had a composition actually entitled Mikrocosmos, a series of compositions entitled Mikrocosmos with the K. You know?
Oh, you always bring Thai culture to us. Pauline, thank you very much. It's a constant education when you're with Pauline. Okay, I want to ask you about this bilingual thing, because I think it's been a struggle for many years with the Georgetown Lit Fest to kind of find itself and find its relationship to its locality, right? And the issue of being bilingual, even in the anthology, I think it's very interesting. Hafiz, does it work? I know we all aspire to cross boundaries, and some of us, you know, can do that. I don't successfully. I'm so much part of the English-speaking world, like, you know. And I think a lot of Malaysians are, right? They're caught in their silos. Are you hopeful, or think maybe is it a kind of misplaced dream to think that we need to be bilingual, trilingual? What is it for you, this blurring of lines, linguistic lines?
Because I think for me, kalau untuk saya sendiri dalam muara ni, idea kenapa bukan bilingual lagi, dah banyak bahasa adalah idea asalnya cara saya pandang Georgetown Literary Fest ni untuk 10 tahun ke belakang, dia selalu jadi tempat yang kita meraihkan orang luar, penulis luar. No doubt diorang ni bagus, saya tahu. Tapi
that's been one of the criticisms.
Yes, tapi kita juga dengan muara ni, at least yang saya cuba buat adalah kita nak orang luar juga baca kita. So ada banyak juga beberapa tulisan dalam Malay yang diterjemah ke English sebenarnya. Dengan apa, sengajalah kita curatekan sebegitu sebab kita rasa kita bukan nak hanya mendengar orang luar punya pandangan terhadap kita, tapi kita nak juga diorang dari satu sisi ada ruang, ada cara untuk dengar juga sendiri kita punya cerita sendiri dalam bahasa English. Itu saya rasa asasnya dan paling awal kenapa kita nak buat muara, antara prinsip yang awalnya lah.
Pauline, so help us understand. I mean, you're a translator. To what extent have we not gotten that side of the equation, right? What Hafiz is saying, which is that, you know, we need to present ourselves to the world, and that might mean translating our works into languages that are not ours, right? And so, is there an imbalance between us being kind of inviting the world, but not being as confident in going out to the world? Would that be an accurate characterization?
I think
about
sometimes
dilemma?
it also depends on how you do it. So if we institutionalize all those efforts to bring ourselves out to the world, it's also, I think, not very successful, because I think what needs to happen, and I think GTLF is a place and Muara is a kind of publication in which these things can happen, is that there needs to be a kind of organic exchange, and not an institutionalized exchange of, you know, diplomatic, sending your delegations and all. I mean, all of that happens on one level, but that's not where I think real literature takes place, and that's not where real art takes place. The real literature and art and everything inspiring really takes place between people and between individual independent efforts, I think. And GTLF and Muara, I think, we want to support that effort. And one of the things that I can see happening in the last 3 years, because we did make a decision to expand the Malay language program, is that I do see that the Malay language community has started to feel that the festival is also theirs, and that they belong to the festival, and in a way that they also own this festival. It's not, and really for me, and I'm sure for you and also for Izzuddin, I think that's what we were thinking of in terms of what the festival should be. It doesn't it's not, of course, it's supported by the state government of Penang, of course. But in terms of who belongs there, it's not just an event, number one. I think it has it should have a longer sustained life in terms of supporting an ecosystem of literary, of writers, readers, translators, and all of that in a meaningful way. So it's not just an end of the year event and then it's finished, you know. And it's not just the podcast. I think even beyond that now with Mwara, and with other kind of sustained conversations, we can be a catalyst for those kinds of things to happen.
Yeah, so one of I think the criticisms over the years has been that, you know, the festival, I mean, is placed within the framework of tourism and placemaking, right? So it's branding Georgetown to the world. It's about bringing people over, experiencing Penang, you know, hotels, food, blah, 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 right? As opposed to maybe placing it under the education, framework, which would then speak to young people, libraries, and what you're saying, which is a sustained engagement with that ecosystem, and in fact, maybe in a way to catalyze that, you know, and bring it forward, right? So, I know there's always this tension with Georgetown, right, between those two impulses.
I think there's also the perception, perhaps, of what people from outside also want to experience. You know, sometimes I think there is, when people come to Malaysia, when people come to a literary festival, I don't think they just want to see everything that they see everywhere else. I think they do want to know and learn something about the people and the writers who are in Malaysia as well. And so all those efforts need to take place. I mean, GTLF can't do all of it, but if there are those independent efforts that are translating our work into English or to other languages as well, and vice versa, all those efforts need to be supported, and GTLF can be a meeting place for all of that.
All right, wonderful. Hafiz, we have a few minutes left. What would you like this effort, where would you like this effort to go? I mean, what would be the next step for you?
Saya kalau boleh pertama sekali lebih ramai orang beli dan baca. Dan kedua, beli dan baca. Sebab itu penting, sebab kalau dengan membeli itu yang akan menyokong usaha-usaha kami yang akan datang lah.
Okay, so we're at the Gerak Budaya bookstore in PJ. It doesn't have a copy yet. I know it's available in Tinta Budi.
Tinta Budi also online.
Online.
Yeah, okay. It's very easy. So kedua, saya rasa kalau boleh untuk GTLF juga, saya rasa baik untuk GTLF untuk ada penerbitan ini setiap tahun. Kita start tahun ini tak apa, kecil-kecilan, sederhana, tapi bergerak ke depan, kalau ada setiap tahun ada satu bentuk dokumentasi begini, saya rasa itu lebih baik, dan sebab itu menunjukkan bukan kita usaha one off sekali habis. So ada usaha-usaha berterusan, sebab orang yang datang, penulis, pelapis apa semua tu sentiasa ada yang baru. Jadi itu perlu untuk tangkap semangat orang-orang ini untuk dipersembahkan dalam bentuk penerbitan yang elok lah.
So back to you, Pauline. Books are wonderful and probably pandemic proof in many ways, right? Everybody can go online. That live element, the charisma that comes from meeting the author that you've read for so many years, or meeting a new author who you didn't know was sparkly and charismatic and wonderful, right? How do we recover that? Is it possible?
Online, it's rather difficult, although I must say that actually the listening experience has its own special qualities. I think particularly listening. We do also have some YouTube videos, but I would really, really encourage people to go to the Spotify podcasts, because listening to me is also a counterpart of reading. And you need to pay attention, you need to kind of quiet your mind a little bit, you need to actually give space for yourself to properly listen to the conversation and what's being said and immerse yourself in that moment. Whereas I think sometimes the online visuals are quite distracting and also quite exhausting. And we've just had too much of that, I think. So in the meantime, I do hope very much that we can return as a physical festival next year. We're all looking forward to that, and we're kind of counting on it, because I don't think we can take much more of this only online thing, you know. So we're hoping for that. But at the same time, there is a lot of wonderful material in the podcast that people should actually go and explore.
Right. Thank you so much, Pauline.
Thank you, Sharaad.
Thank you, Hafiz. Pauline Fan, director of the Georgetown Lit Festival, and Hafiz Hamzah from Svara magazine, journal rather, and the wonderful collaboration they call Mwara, available online. Thank you very much for being with me on Let's Talk. I'm Sharaad Kuttan, only for Astro AWANI.